What is up, and welcome back to Cryptogrfx. It's been a minute, but today we're going to be talking about something very different than what we're normally talking about on the channel, which is like Hex, PulseX, Pulse Chain, the whole 9 yards. And we're going to be talking about a brand new, well, relatively 28-day-old project that brings the game theory of like Zen, of Hex, PulseX, and all these little mechanics that make number go up all in one place. And without further ado, guys help me bring on Jake Sharp, the founder of Titanx. Jake,
Nice.
It's been a minute, man. Welcome back to the channel.
I'm excited. I like how you put it. Just basically everything made to go, the number go up, technology, the best type of technology.
Exactly. Well, that's why we're all here, right? So might as well. Someone had to do it, right? So nice work, my man. So let's get right into it. I know we kind of talked about it even briefly there, but why did you create Titanx?
So there's a couple angles to it. One is, as an influencer, I was kind of tired of shilling other people's projects. Not in the way of I didn't like that project, in the way of I didn't like how the founders acted. So I was like, dude, somebody needs to come in and just do everything correctly. And then I started kind of building certain token ideas. I have like an entire document of all the ideas I've had. And then everything just kind of slowly started coming together. And one of the biggest issues I tried to solve is, because we've all tried to onboard our friends and family, mom, dad, girlfriend, a friend of a friend, into crypto. And one of the issues is always that they only get into crypto when something is stopping, when something has done like a 3 to 4x, and now it's at a stop. And then it's the only shot for them to buy in because they're impatient. They don't want to wait 2 to 3 weeks. They kind of want to get onboarded now and get started with crypto. And I was like, okay, how can we fix that? How can we onboard people into crypto and give them a good experience? The only way to do that is to get them to create their own supply instead of having to buy it off of somebody else at a local top or a cycle top, even worse. If you get them in at the top of the bull run, they experience 95% and they're jaded forever. They're like, oh, this crypto thing is a scam. So that was the number one issue I was trying to solve, is how do you onboard people in a way that is still price positive in the long term to get them to essentially buy the bottom and have a good crypto experience. And this is something that Zen did very well, is you create your own supply. Put some time in, create your own supply, create your miners, and you create your own supply. You don't have to buy the top of somebody else or buy the top from somebody else. That was a big design principle. So that's what a mining idea kind of started of. Like, mining is pretty much the only way to do it, is by creating your own coins at a certain cost that is not the top. So that's where mining began. And then, having been around crypto for a long time, I've always been obsessed with game theory and tokenomics. So I have an entire Google document with all of the tokenomics of all the tokens, not just the ones I talk about publicly on YouTube, which is like a very small sliver, but I've looked at everything. And I was like, why is it that this project has this good tokenomic, this project has this good tokenomic? Why has nobody just done a survey of the market, took all of the best stuff that the market actually liked? Because you can have a good tokenomic on paper that nobody cares about, and it doesn't do anything. But then you have tokenomics that the market just frothed at the mouth for. And I was like, okay, what if we take all of these market validated tokenomics, put it into one thing, and make it one cohesive big picture that people can build on top of? And that's kind of where Titanx came from.
Yeah, that's sick. So I appreciate what you've done with Titan, because there is not any cryptos out there really that have taken all of the things, and try to put it in one place. So that's fantastic. So now let's start off with, what is Titan? If you're explaining it to my grandma, how would you explain it to her? The 3-minute, 4-minute, whatever it is, super simple overview. What is it?
I'm still kind of working on the elevator pitch, but it's basically just a cryptocurrency that you mine. Yeah. And it becomes harder to mine over time. And it's kind of designed to have a strong community built on top of it, and to give developers free reign to use the Titanx ecosystem to launch their own tokens, launch their own protocols that buy and burn it or whatever. It's a mineable cryptocurrency that you can build upon, and all the technology inside of the cryptocurrency is kind of made to go up in the future with the price floor, and becomes harder to mine over time. I guess you can kind of compare it to Bitcoin. Bitcoin came into existence by people starting miners, but they actually had to use hardware instead of virtual mining like Titanx does. And they could create their own blocks. And then it becomes scarcer and scarcer and scarcer over time. So Bitcoin is kind of programmed to go up over time through the Bitcoin halvings. Titanx is a way more aggressive version of that, because we're never going to be Bitcoin, because we don't have the time history. We're like 28 days old, which has been insane. We've been in the top at least 20 of Ethereum for 28 days straight. Normally it's
top
like
7 right now, or top 13 now currently.
Exactly. You're like, and when you launch, you're in the top 1, you're like in the top 10 for like a day or two, and then everybody forgets about you. Titanx has been in the top 20 for 28 days straight. That's fucking insane. So people really like the idea. And so it's basically a mineable cryptocurrency that people can build on top of, and everything in the cryptocurrency is designed to make it go extremely It's designed to go from hyperinflationary to hyperdeflationary in a very, very quick time span.
Interesting thing too about Titan to now build on top of this more simple overview is that you're leveraging ETH, which that's a whole different kind of game that we're playing now, because now you're not basically, you have a two token system and one already has value and you're leveraging that thing with value, which, like we were talking about off screen, is likely to go up in the future. And that impacts the difficulty, that impacts the performance of price, the value of Titan, the whole system, the value of a system that's built on top of this as a whole. So can you talk to ETH and why you chose ETH and how that plays its part in Titanx?
Yep. So there's a bunch of chains that I looked at. Ethereum is the best because it has the most volume. So if you're an entrepreneur and you have the option between going into a shopping mall where 100,000 people visit every day and they walk past your shop, or going to some brand new shopping mall where there's maybe like 30 people and it's in some kind of desolate area that's hard to get to, you'll probably just pay more and be on the shopping mall that has the most visitors, right? So Ethereum is that. And I found that every single chain, Pulse Chain, X1 in the future, Solana, etc., everybody that is on an outside chain is also on Ethereum. But not everybody on Ethereum is on the outside chains. So by going for Ethereum, you get the biggest market, you get the most volume. Like Ethereum does 1 billion a day in volume. You just get the most people, which is why we chose Ethereum. And it's also the chain that will be around forever because it's been around for such a long time. All the other chains are kind of like a bet, a shot in the dark. Except for the ones that have been around for a long time, they'll probably end up being around. But there's a lot of new chains launching and they have no volume, no community, no public fund, no nothing. So we chose E because also Titanx is basically leverage play on a native token on chain that it's on, which on Ethereum is Ethereum. We currently don't have any plans of going to other chains because Ethereum is just crushing it. Ethereum has all the volume. Ethereum will have all of the volume, has all the adoption. In the future, they'll have sharding, which makes the gas fees go down and make it more adoption friendly. But it has all the volume. And it also, Titanx is basically backed by the native token because the buy and burn buys in Ethereum. The liquidity pool is in Ethereum. People pay Ethereum. So it's backed by real value and it has leverage on the chain that it's on. And it costs a certain amount of Ethereum to create Titanx. So the higher up Ethereum price goes. So there's a couple of like disinflationary mechanics. So the supply that you can mine every day goes down. The cost to mine goes up. And the asset that you're using to mine, which is Ethereum, also goes up in price. So it's a very, very exponential price floor. So in the future, it's going to be so hard to mine. Like, for example, right now we can mine 1.55 billion Titanx. In the future, after like the first 280-day cycle ends, so on protocol day 280, you can only mine 600 million, not 1.55 billion anymore. And Ethereum might be up at 2x. So it might cost you 12 times more to mine to mine less Titanx. So you can actually, it's like 20 times more than what the early miners paid.
It's going to be pretty wild to watch this system grow. And I'm going to bring up the white paper just because I know that's kind of hard to understand, if you're a viewer and, you're trying to think about all this. So let me just bring up the document here and we will, where is it here? I think it's this one. Cool. So this is the first chart here. We've got the ETH cost per max miner, minimum and max. Talk me through what we're looking at here.
Yep. So this is the Ethereum cost to start a max miner. When we mention max miner, we mean 100 power, basically. The length doesn't dictate max miner, it's just the power. And it starts at 0.2 and then it ratchets its way up to 1 Ethereum 2,000 days in. This is basically
and if
the
I
cost.
Can interject here, and if I can interject here, just to clarify one thing here. So when you start a miner, guys, with Titanx, like the most you can set for one miner starts at 0.2. Right. So you can pay 0.2 ETH and you can earn a certain amount of Titan per the miner that you have. And that's going to go up every single day all the way up to 0.1. So this is this curve that is slowly coming up here. Just wanted to clarify just what we're talking about within the miners. And when you're referring to power, specifically 100 all the way down to 1, if you're doing just a full miner, you get 100. And you could think of the power as a percentage of the maximum, right? 100 is 0.2 ETH. If you do 10 power, that's 0.02 ETH, and 1 power is 0.002 ETH. So I just want to clarify that for everyone watching, that you understand that power isn't this abstract thing. It's really just like full power, 10%, 1%, anything in between, and you can scale that back however you like. It's really that simple. Sorry, just wanted to clarify that.
Good. Yep. And this goes up 0.08% a day. So just to give an example, Ethereum, so Titanx launched when Ethereum was roughly 1770. so like $1,770. Ethereum is currently on 2,100. So on day one, you could start a max miner for $320. Right now, it's $430, and you get roughly 10% less Titanx. So the human brain has such a hard time catching like exponential things, which is why I tried creating these charts to kind of everybody can understand a chart. But like understanding exponential numbers, you need some kind of Google Sheets wizardry to fully understand it.
100%. It's even to try and map out, like, I know I've built models for many of these things like Hex and PulseX and Hedron and Cosa, all these crazy game mechanic filled protocols. And even when it gets into something like this, where you've got something that goes up while something's getting more difficult, the numbers don't make sense to the brain, even when you're looking at them, because you're like, how is that possible? So when layers of difficulty are kind of stacked like this, things can go crazy quickly.
Yep. And then the chart under that is a supply mineable per day. So you have the ETH cost and then supply mineable. This is the most important thing. So on day one, the first day, so all of the old miners also get the global reduction supply to them, which is why you don't get 8 million times number of days. You get 8 million times whatever it reduces with it. So you don't get 2.2 billion, you get 1.7 billion on day one, for example.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
So the best way to kind of explain it, and if you can see on this chart, so on day one, 8 million. It was actually 8.8 million if you include the early adoption amplifier, which is still running until 350 days in. But every day you go longer in the miner, you get that day's number of Titanx mineable. So if you do a 1 day miner, you get 8 million. If you do a 2 day miner, you get 8 million plus 7,980,000, etc. So every day you go out, you kind of mimic the global reduction. And you can see it on the UI. You don't actually have to calculate yourself. The UI calculates it. But this is important. So, because otherwise you get this price floor that doesn't actually move up, and it becomes very unfair for new miners compared to old miners. This system actually makes it extremely fair for new miners to come in, because they get the exact same, or it's like a very tiny bit less, because we had to do some math flattening to not make it too gas expensive to do the calculations. But this makes it very fair, because when new miners come in, the day that they start is also the amount of Titan that the old miners get on that day. So they don't have an extremely unfair disadvantage compared to old miners.
So great UI. I think it's very easy to work with this, and it's a great job on this, I gotta admit.
I made it.
Very nice, my man. Very nice. Yep. So walk me through, you're just talking about on the UI here.
Okay, so on the left side, you have miner length, which determines how many tokens you get, and you have miner power, which determines what you pay. So the miner power actually does not impact your cost per Titanx, it just impacts your cost per miner. So even if you have like a 1 power miner, you still pay the same amount per token as a 100 power miner. So the miner power is just...
Say that one more time.
So the miner power impacts the price, and the miner length impacts the amount of tokens that you get. So the longer out you go, the less you pay per token. And then miner power, the lower you go, the less you pay per miner. You also get less tokens, but it's linear, meaning that if you pay $1 per Titanx that you get at the end of your miner, if you go 1 power, you still pay $1, you just get 100 times less tokens. So it doesn't impact the cost per tokens, it just impacts how many tokens you get. The reason we did this is because we all probably, if you've been on Ethereum for a while, you probably have some dead wallets that have like 0.4 Ethereum in them, like maybe 3 or 4 laying around. With those, you can just create, or like let's say 0.2 Ethereum. And if you have 0.2 Ethereum, you can't create a miner because you have to pay gas fees. So what you could do is you could set your miner power to 50 and start a 50 power miner on that wallet, and you still have gas fees left, etc., etc. This is just kind of so that people have a very easy time just kind of putting their change to work, so it's not just sitting in the wallet.
Yeah, great explanation. I think it makes perfect sense. Yeah, the power determines how much you're paying to start the miner. Doesn't change how much per day you're earning, and then the length determines how many days you're earning the Titanx over time. I think that's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. And the interesting thing too here is with Titan, you kind of have this because you've got a market price, right? You can go look at the chart right now, and you can see a price, which is over here. But how the thing that's interesting about Titan is that we have this market price here, but we're mining this amount. And if we were to end that today, it would be worth this amount here, which is 27.15 for 280 day for $217, right? So the interesting thing about this is that when you mine, you aren't paying, like you were saying, you aren't paying the market price. You're actually creating your own price based on length, and length is related. Well, length and power are related directly to what you're paying as your break-even price per se. So in this case, you could basically almost take off a 0 here, or add a 0 into this market price, like 10x less. And that would be like more or less, like it's not perfect here, but just to give you an idea, it's basically what your break-even price is. So the price would have to go all the way down and add another 0 into this market price if you were to do this miner for you to be at break even. Now, that's a really interesting concept that I want to talk about a little bit more later because it's a little bit more advanced. But I think it is important to understand like how these numbers can actually be sitting here, make sense, and be real. It's because you're creating your own break-even point, your own market buy price, if you will. Like it's almost like a DCA average buy-in price, if you will. And that's always going to be different. Well, most of the time it's going to be different than the Titanx market price.
Yeah, that's a good way of explaining it. Exactly. So if you mine, so the market price will always be at a premium, pretty much. And if you mine, you just have to be willing to wait. And the less you mine, so let's say, for example, can you put the miner length on 28 days, for example? You'll see the amount of tokens that you get drop off heavily. If you just do 28, as you can see, now you get 107 million, and it's a much lower ROI. And the difficulty ratchets up and ratchets up and ratchets up.
So I can show you guys just how quickly Titanx per day deflate, or the supply gets more difficult.
That's nice. Do it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do that real quick here. So what I'm going to show you guys is, again, we start at 8 million per day, and we slowly go down over the course of 2,000 days all the way to 800, which there's a little nugget we're going to wait to share closer to the end, because there's a little bit of math you can do relative to ETH based on that to speculate on the future value of Titanx related to ETH. But we're going to wait for that for now. So just stay tuned if you want that little nugget. Okay. So this is the screen. So on day 1, Titanx per day was 8 million. And if we scroll down even to day 20, now we're at 7.48 million. And if we go all the way down to day 100 over here, now we're down to 5.6 million. So in just over 3 months, we've gone down like 30-something% in like about 30% in the amount of Titanx you can get per day in 3 months. That's pretty crazy.
Yep, and the cost moves up. So I like looking at these numbers and cost per Titanx.
Yes, exactly. Let me just go back here. So, cost per Titanx. I have the max miner floor, and this is what I was talking about here too. So I have the max miner floor. So this is when you're doing max miners, this price here. This is the total. This is the floor, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros and a 2, 3. Currently, we're at 5 zeros and 3, 5. So over time, now mind you, this is day 1, and we're slowly going up here all the way to. We're gonna go back up all the way up to day 100 again. So just watch closely what happens to the numbers. The floor is slowly rising here, and by the time we get all the way to day 100, which should be right here, the miner floor has doubled, meaning not only do you have a difficulty factor increasing, you've got the floor is going up, and ETH has now gone from 0.2 to begin to be mining a full power miner all the way to 0.21 ETH. In 100 days is the difficulty increase. So now you've gone from 1.7 billion that you can mine for a max miner all the way down to 1.1 billion, which is crazy. I'd love to hear more about from you on this.
Yeah, and then also because the prices in Ethereum since launch, so 28 days ago, Ethereum was at 1770. Now it's at 2,110, roughly. That's also a 20% increase. So Ethereum is currently at 2,100, roughly. And it started when we launched the Titanx was 1770. So that's a 20% increase. So all these numbers is times 20, times 20%. So instead of a 2x increase, it's actually 2.4x. If Ethereum does a 5x, it's actually a 10x increase in 100 days, the price floor.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah, you basically have to multiply everything by 1.2. So if we go back to, where is it here? If we go back to the Titanx documentation, there is an interesting curve here that I want to talk about. Where is it here? I think it is the right. So in terms of when it comes to ETH cost, right? And we were talking about the leverage play and how this values, or how if ETH creates value over time as it increases in difficulty to Titanx. Now, there's a little bit of math down here. Can you run us through this? I'm going to read it real quick, and then I'd like you to break this down. So to make things simple to understand, here's how this works out. The cost to mine one Titanx moves up 55,000x. The cost per miner in ETH gets 5 times more expensive over this time. So it goes from 0.2 to 0.2 to 1 ETH. The Titanx per day miner goes down 11,000x from 8.8 million to 800, which is basically all saying over the time that Titanx gets to its cap on all these parameters, Titanx moves up 55,000x. This is all just hypothetical stuff, right? In that time, the cost of a max miner goes from 0.2 to 1, which is a 5x. And the Titanx that you can get per day per miner goes from 8.8 million to 800. Right now, combined, if you do all that math, that's 55,000x price floor increase on the cost to produce one Titanx. Now, since the share rate moves up 0.03, which we haven't gotten into staking yet, and what happens when what you can do with Titanx as well every day from 800 to 2,800, a 3.5x increase. This means the thing above. Wait, hold on. So this plus this plus the thing above means the cost to produce one share in staking goes up 55,000x times 3.5x, which equals 192,500x in difficulty. So can you break this down into more tangible terms? Because that's a huge number of x's. But this is really just describing the level of difficulty increase that the system creates for creating a Titan over time, right?
Yep, exactly.
Right now, combined, if you do all that math, that's 55,000x price floor increase on the cost to produce one Titanx. Now, since the share rate moves up 0.03, which we haven't gotten into staking yet, and what happens when what you can do with Titanx as well every day from 800 to 2,800, a 3.5x increase. This means the thing above. Wait, hold on. So this plus the thing above means the cost to produce one share in staking goes up 55,000x times 3.5x, which equals 192,500x in difficulty. So can you break this down into more tangible terms? Because that's a huge number of x's. But this is really just describing the level of difficulty increase that the system creates for creating a Titan over time, right?
Yep, exactly. So one big caveat is also, in the long term, the thing that is going to give value to Titanx is the things built on top of it, which is a very big. So Titanx currently is kind of the supply distribution phase, the MVP phase, where we build a community, etc. And then other protocols are going to give utility to liquid Titanx, which is also a big reason why the market premium will be there pretty much at all times. The share rate, so the actual cost to produce one Titanx goes up 55,000x. And this is not financial advice, not a price prediction. This is just the math inside of the protocol. Is this 55,000x is if Ethereum price stays the same. If Ethereum does a 5x, it's up to 250,000x. It's like 250,000x. So this is assuming Ethereum stays at the same price forever, which we all know won't be the case. And then the share rate, what that means is your percentage in the staking pool payouts. This moves up massively fast, which is why there's almost 1 trillion Titanx staked already, because I think people really get it. In the future, it's going to be almost impossible to build a strong staking position because the share rate moves up and the amount of Titanx you're able to get either off of market or through mining is going to be so hard to get your hands on, where it's going to be almost impossible to build a big staking position to get a portion of the Ethereum that comes from new miners. That's kind of the share rate portion of it. But the first portion is the actual price floor. And if there is sufficient community adoption, the price floor kind of becomes the agreed upon price by the market. Because Bitcoin also, if you look at Bitcoin during bear market drops, Bitcoin tends to drop back down to the cost to produce for miners. How much electricity they pay, how much they pay in hardware, it almost always drops down pretty much to, and then it overextends a little bit to the downside, but it tends to drop to the price floor that it costs to create a Bitcoin from miners. This is basically the price floor for Titanx. You can apply that same kind of heuristic to the Titanx price floor. It's like, I think a real world example that you can give is if you, let's say you have a crack house. You have a house that turns into a crack house. It's going to be almost impossible for you to not get the price that it costs to create the house, the concrete, whatever else it is for to create a house, a roof.
That makes perfect sense though with the house, because the goods are the goods. They have a cost, and that is totally relatable over time. And so if the goods themselves that are have produced and you've been used to build the house per se, then over time, that house is going to become more expensive. And whether, I mean, it's you can get in the nuance of like, we're talking about inflation versus value in terms of real money, but still value in terms of what it costs in the thing that you have to buy the goods with goes up, then the difficulty increases. So I think that using ETH was a brilliant idea. I loved it. I love it.
Yeah, because also like Ethereum, if the US dollar massively inflates, Ethereum is a scarce asset. So Ethereum will just go up in value. So Titanx is based on Ethereum, not on the US dollar.
Right. That's a good point. And we talked a little bit about the share system, the share rate within the staking, which we haven't actually talked about yet. Let me bring up the UI again. And I want to talk about what happens because, we've gone to the point now where you mine your Titan, you spend your time waiting, you get your Titan. Now what? Well, I'm going to bring this up, and you can actually stake your Titanx as well. And I want you to go through this with me and explain to everybody the cycles, because there's a bunch of cycles, and you don't get paid out in Titanx. You actually get payouts in ETH, which is very interesting. And there's been a lot of people piling in cyclically, and you can't just pile in for a day though. There's a minimum stake length. So can you walk me through kind of what we're looking at here with the staking, and then we'll move over to the payouts to explain what exactly is going on there, what you're earning.
So you can, once you have your Titanx from miners or you buy it off of market, it's one of the things that I also want to say is in the beginning, there was a massive overextension to the downside where Titanx actually dropped significantly after launch, which pretty much every coin does. And whales, there was one whale in particular. I won't say dox his address because I don't want to fuck other people's wallets. But he bought $220,000 worth of Titanx on market and locked it for 3,500 days. So these guys understand that the moment it overextends to the downside, you can make ROI on staking, they buy it. So Titanx also has a fair value price based on the amount of Ethereum you can get from staking. So there's a lot of like real value built into Titanx. It's not just some kind of shitcoin because it's all based on Ethereum. So with the staking, you can decide. I think a better example. Well, we can stay on this. You can stake a certain amount of Titanx, or you can stake unlimited, but it determines how much Titanx you stake and how long you stake it for determines how many shares you get. And you get a percentage of the payouts based on your shares versus everybody's shares in the system versus global shares. The longer out you go, the more shares you get, and it's a big difference. So if you go 28 days, you'll get basically the normal share rate, which is 806. But if you go 3,500 days, it actually all caps out at 2,888. If you go 2,888 days, you get a 350% increase in your shares. So the longer out you go, the bigger your share is based on the Titanx that you're staking, and that determines your payouts, which is why a lot of the whales just max staked it. And in the future, you're also going to be able to burn your stakes for Hyper, which we'll get in a little bit later. But there's a lot of utility coming to Titan, because Titan is designed to be a base asset of an ecosystem built on top of it. So you want the base asset to be backed by real things, which is Ethereum. So that, and this is kind of what you see, because you have other ecosystems where people build on top of the ecosystem, but then if the base asset of the ecosystem, which in this case would be Titanx, is weak, the entire ecosystem is weak, because all the value is based on the base asset. So that's why Titanx is a leverage play on the value of Ethereum. It's backed by Ethereum pretty much. Has massive liquidity, but it's like 400 grand or whatever, 28 days in. Yeah, 403,000.
Right. And on that note, let's go over to the payouts and explain what happens over time within the system. Because you got all these things saying 8-day, 28-day, 90-day, 369, 888. What's happening here?
Yep. So cool fact, the first 8-day payout was $1.2 million. The payout that happened today, like how many hours ago? Like 10 hours ago or whatever, was 1.5 million. So Titanx has actually paid out over $3 million to stakers because there's been 3 8-day payouts as well. That's pretty crazy. So people really like it. So the way the payout cycles work, it's rolling. So it's every 8 days, every 28 days, every 90 days, every 369 days, and every 888 days. The reason we have the 369 and the 888 payout cycles is because it keeps everybody focused on a point in the future. Because one of the worst things that can happen to a cryptocurrency is people join a protocol, they participate for 2 days, they make a little bit of profit, and they forget about it because there's no long-term vision for the protocol. So we needed hooks to keep people in for the long term, which are the big staking payouts that happen in the future. It's a hook to keep everybody in. Also, when you start the miner, time is pretty much the biggest design principle of Titanx, because the moment people spend time on something, they care about something. When they care, you get a strong community. So the payout cycles are rolling. So it's every 8 days. So for example, the 8-day cycle paid out on protocol day 8, day 16, 24, and the next one is going to be in 4 days on day 32. The 28-day pays out 28, 56, etc., etc. You can just do times like 90 times 2, and you can figure out the dates. But this is pretty much rolling. The staking is massively important to give fair value to Titan. So you have two kind of things holding the price up. One is the price floor to produce one Titanx through mining. The other one, that's kind of a long-term price floor, where it's going to be very, very hard to drop it below that price. And then you also have the staking price floor, because Titanx has utility because it's a token that gives you access to the Ethereum payouts from staking. And then there's a bunch of other utility that will come to Titanx by people building on top of it. Hyper is going to be one of those examples, which is in development. Hyper is basically going to be the first protocol launched on top of Titanx. That's going to give utility to liquid Titanx and stake Titanx. It's going to add utility to stakes because you're going to have the ability to become liquid. And then there's some very interesting game theory between the burn pool payouts, the burn bonus amplifier, and there's a whole kind of lineup of game theory that goes live the moment Hyper goes live. And the community has been insane. Like I looked on YouTube, I looked up Titanx crypto, and there's been so many influencers that I've never ever heard of that have been started talking about Titanx. There's a bunch of really big ones, like one guy with 500,000 subscribers, another guy with 200,000 subscribers, another guy with like 20, 50, 10,000. People are completely outside of the community that I was a part of initially. So Titanx is getting a lot of steam. One of the things that I've also seen on chain, because I watch on chain a lot, is there's a lot of big Ethereum whales that have participated in Titanx. And if I look on their wallets and where they come from, I've seen this whole narrative form across like Ethereum whales. There's been a couple, like 3 to 5 Ethereum whales, like a couple thousand Ethereum in their wallet. And I see that they kind of take that Ethereum out of Lido and they treat Titanx as a alternate form of Ethereum staking, which is very interesting to see. So either they start miners or they do max stakes, because the amount of yield you can get on your Ethereum on Titanx is way more than you can ever get through native Ethereum, kind of Lido, validated kind of staking.
You also mentioned that there's going to be the ability for developers to build on top of Titan. So can you explain, Hyper is one thing that is being built, but other things will also be built. And how can other protocols actually interact with Titan to benefit the ecosystem as a whole?
Yep. So the best way to look at a lot of companies nowadays that build on attention, one of the biggest issues that new protocols have is having the ability to garner a community. It's very easy to garner a community if you're actually willing to put your face out there, which 99.5% of founders are too afraid to do. Is if they integrate Titanx into the protocol, either by burning it and bringing their token into existence like that, or implementing some kind of buy and burn based on the fees that the protocol generate into Titanx, they can essentially adopt a crypto community into their protocol. So the biggest asset for people to build on top of Titanx is, one, to push the value of their Titanx backs up. If they're like big Titanx investors, they can build protocols that support their actual positions. That's like one angle of it. The other angle is people can just integrate Titanx into the protocol and they instantly adopt a well-funded kind of DeFi native community into their protocol. So the biggest asset that will bring outside developers into Titanx is the ability to instantly adopt a kind of diehard zealous community into their protocol.
We've covered the mining, and we've covered the length, the power, price floors. We've covered staking and how you can stake your Titanx, which I think is actually, on another note, I think it's very cool to stake one token and earn another. So that way, if you're staking, you don't sell down the price of the thing that you're staking to lower it in value. I think that's very cool. And in fact, it actually allows you to then leverage that thing that you got to get more miners to then stake to earn more of the thing that got you the Titanx in the first place, which is a cool looping system. We've gone over the payouts, the 5 different payouts, which I love. And I think that it's really important here for the 90 and the 360 to notice that, we're already at $1 million for the 90-day. We are at $1 million for 369. and we're only 28 days in. So we have basically not even gone 1/3 of the way to the 90-day payout, and we haven't even gone, oh God, don't ask me to do the math there. We're barely into 369, and we're already at $1 million. So these are big things to pay attention to in terms of longevity, because these are going to cycle as well, right? So now there's another piece of the equation I want to talk about. You mentioned burning. So let's go to the stats real quick, and I'm going to show you guys the supply right now and how everything is divvied up. You see this red piece here. This is the buy and burned amount of supply. If we go over to the purple, this is the staked amount of Titanx. And if we go to the blue here, this is the liquid amount of Titanx. Here are the numbers. This is pretty crazy. So liquid only has 16.7% of the total supply right now. Staked has 45 basically percent of the supply. And this section here is the most intriguing. I mean, all these are super intriguing in their own right, but the buy and burn side is super intriguing because this isn't just burned. This is bought and burnt supply, and we're up to 37% of supply that's come into the system so far. That's pretty wild. So on that note, what is the buy and burn? Because if we go over to this button here on the top that says buy and burn, we notice that there's V2 and V1. Can you explain the differences, how it all works, like why, and yeah, just whatever else you have on that front for us?
Yep. So there's two different buy and burns. It initially launched with the buy and burn V1, which we've noticed some, I wouldn't say issues, but it wasn't run through MEV protection, because what we've seen is that the moment the global gap moves up, what MEV bot will do is it will trigger 7 to 8 buy and burns in one hit, and they let their bot buy before and then sell straight after, which kind of negates the entire move. So we launched the V2, which is fully and completely decentralized, and that actually implements a interval. So people can call the buy and burn every X minutes. So in this case, it's 8 minutes. So as you can see under the button, it says current cap per swap is 0.82 Ethereum, and it's callable every 8 minutes. There's no global cap. And the V2 launched 8 days into the protocol, so 20 days ago, and it's already buy and burned roughly 1,300 Ethereum, and it has buy and burned 505 billion Titanx. So the V2 is doing most of the work right now. And as you can see, it builds up. So at this pace, at 8 minutes a day, it's, if you have like a 90% effective trigger rate, meaning that people don't call it the exact second 8 minutes happens, there's like a 10% delay or whatever, it actually buys and burns like 120 Ethereum a day. So this is kind of like a trickle of buy pressure, which keeps the market price at a premium, which attracts a miners in and grows the entire ecosystem. The V1 has now become a guardian angel or backstop of the ecosystem, meaning that if there are massive price dumps or a very malicious well comes in, the buy and burn V1 can just kick in, buy up the entire supply and get everything back to premium, pretty much. So the V1 is kind of like the guardian angel / backstop of the ecosystem, and the V2 is the fully decentralized new version that is MEV protected, and users can just call whenever it is available.
And how do we end up with V1 and V2 here? Like how do we end up
MEV
with 2?
protection.
MEV protection. So originally, was the plan from the get-go to have 2?
No, not at all. But we noticed that we needed it. So that's why the V2 kind of became a thing, and V1 became the guardian angel. Yeah, because especially like, for example, on day 280, there's, I think, a large amount of supply that comes out. I think it's like a couple trillion comes out. You need something like a V1, because otherwise you have these buy and burns that build up. And imagine this, day 280 happens, 90% of people dump their supply, it nukes to 0, and there's no buy and burn to save the ecosystem. That would kind of suck, because that would mean Titanx would fail and not adopt new people in. And the other thing is everything on top of Titanx will fail as well, because it's the base asset of everything. So if Titanx nukes to 0, for example, everything else nukes to 0 because it's all based on Titanx. So the V1 is meant to be a guardian angel, and then the V2 is the constant, incessant, relentless, never-ending buy and burn.
Right, and so V1 gets triggered by like a no expectations Genesis kind of wallet or entity, or
Yep.
Can you explain
so the V1,
how that all works?
The V1, the best way to kind of explain it works on indicators. So the main thing, the V1, what triggers the V1 is basically a sort of combination of indicators that's based on the amount of supply coming out during a certain day and price premiums. It's relatively advanced. It's not completely random. The issue is there's $9.8 million in it. And what we've noticed is if the buy and burn is extremely predictable, whales will completely manipulate it. They'll buy the supply before, they'll just trigger all of it and then just dump and negate the entire move. So it needs to be unpredictable. Otherwise, it's open to malicious actors just completely abuse it, and it's no longer a benefit to the community, but 1 to 2 big whales that are just maliciously using it.
Right, that makes perfect sense. And the way I've been thinking about the buy and burn is I've been kind of thinking about the health of this ecosystem, and I'm thinking about how it may be beneficial to think of this thing as more of a sponge, than a rocket, because if you, like you said, if you just blow this thing up, if the genesis or the controller of this address does that, I mean, yeah, you're just gonna basically have everything nuked down to zero. The value is gonna be too high. There's gonna be no way to compensate for it, and it's just gonna come to zero. So like I foresee like a lot of the buy and burn action as a sponge. It's not a straight to the moon ticket or anything like that, which is super interesting to think about over time. Because we're gonna have major supply shocks, especially day 280. Like you said, there's probably trillions of Titanx going to come out. I mean, over the last today, because today is day 28, and yesterday we're just shy of 300 billion Titanx that are coming onto the market from miners. The way I've been thinking about the buy and burn is I've been kind of thinking about the health of this ecosystem, and I'm thinking about how it may be beneficial to think of this thing as more of a sponge, than a rocket, because if you, like you said, if you just blow this thing up, if the genesis or the controller of this address does that, I mean, yeah, you're just gonna basically have everything nuked down to zero. The value is gonna be too high. There's gonna be no way to compensate for it, and it's just gonna come to zero. So like I foresee like a lot of the buy and burn action as a sponge. It's not a straight to the moon ticket or anything like that, which is super interesting to think about over time. Because we're gonna have major supply shocks, especially day 280. Like you said, there's probably trillions of Titanx going to come out. I mean, over the last today, because today is day 28, and yesterday we're just shy of 300 billion Titanx that are coming onto the market from miners. So now the interesting thing on that note too is that the price hasn't tanked. It's staying at a support level, which whole different conversation here. But
it's wild. I expected the price to just fucking nuke. But it didn't.
Did too.
This thing is fucking insane, man. Like, it's doing things that I never expected. I would fully expect a nuke, but it is what it is. It's holding up way better than I expected.
Absolutely. I was definitely ready for quite the tank, But what's interesting too is if we go back over to the where is it here? The stats. Yesterday, this was about about 100 billion. Or I think it was like 890, 880, 870 billion Titanx that was in the stake supply. And now we're at 963. So a lot of the supply that came out yesterday was actually staked. Now there's a lot that's liquid. We've gone up like almost 100 billion. No, shy, maybe like 80 billion, 90 billion. But still, like there's a lot of people going and staking. And it's super interesting because I think most of the time, you've seen people participate in protocols like, well, look at Hex, for example, right? Hex had, I don't know what I had in the beginning. I mean, when Big Payday was coming around, I think it was a different story. And I wasn't around for that. I don't have all the numbers for that. But it's very interesting that the liquid supply is so small and the stake supply is so high relative to one another. And do you think that this implies, why are people staking so much? Do you think it's because of hyper? Do you think it's because of the payout systems? Like, why are people staking so much?
So there was a very interesting moment in time after, I think it was like around day 7 or whatever of Titanx, and the price was way below what it cost to mine in that time period. And at some points when the price was like below 2, you could actually just buy on market, which is what the whale did. Like that whale bought $220,000 worth of Titanx and just max staked it. And he fully ROI'd on that alone. He made 100% ROI based on the Ethereum he got from the staking payout, 1 day of staking payout. So that's probably why a lot of supply got bought off the market at that point and just staked max, because they can just ROI off of the Ethereum and then max the Ethereum that they got from the payouts. Some of them got 80% ROI, some of them got 100%, and they made a profit already just from the Ethereum from the staking payouts. And then a lot of them know in the future they're going to be able to burn their stakes for hyper and get liquid again. So they're not locked in for the full duration. They can get out whenever they want once hyper is live.
That's a very cool mechanic. To be able to stake max to earn the payouts, and if you're doing it right as well. You know, you could even, when it comes to the staking, let's say you have a massive amount of Titan, you know, you don't have to just go all in. You can break these stakes up into multiple stakes, correct? You can have as many stakes as you really want to have basically fractions of your total stack, so that you can say plan for maybe 35 or 2888. Then you have a rolling payout going on, but then you also have, because you all have all these stakes, you have the option to burn Titan or burn for Hyper, sorry, whenever it makes more sense to do so, for whatever game plan you have, which I think is super interesting.
100%. I mean, there's so much game theory in this protocol. Like, I remember in the beginning when it launched, everybody's like, oh, but Jake did this because this guy made a lot of profit. I'm like, dude, I barely had time to breed, let alone kind of play the system. There's been so many things that has come out for Hyper and people sharing game theory where I'm like, damn, that's interesting. Because if you have so many like moving game theory parts, it's impossible to even fully grasp it, even if you're the founder. So now I'm seeing like very interesting to happen. Like, I didn't expect this to happen where a guy just bought 200 grand on market and max staked it because he would ROI on the staking payout. I didn't even think of that. You know, that's kind of the cool thing about a very well-designed systems, is it has consequences in the future that you never even thought of. And that was one of those examples. I didn't think about it a lot, but now I think it's because of the massive adoption. In the first 3 days, we had over $10 million worth of Ethereum go in, which is insane. We broke records. We even broke the Zen launch. We had more Ethereum in the first 3 days than Zen had in the first 3 days. And we've been in the top 20 of Ethereum for the first 28 days of the protocol, which I think almost no launch has done, except if it's like backed by VCs and like big names or whatever. But like a normal token launching, like this doesn't happen. So Titanx is like breaking records left and right.
100%. It's actually wild. I think this is a cool part where if we go to talk about that model, that or the math, the difficulty curve, and going from 8 million Titan to 800. Okay, so at day 2000, there's an interesting thing that happens. Both the cost to start a miner at 100 power goes all the way up to 100, or sorry, to 1. And the Titanx per miner per day goes down and finally reaches 800. So there's an interesting ratio there. If you look at 1 ETH is equal to 800 Titanx. And so you can do the math on that. I'm not going to bring it up on screen. I'm not going to do any crazy moon math here. But if you do that ratio, you'll see some pretty crazy numbers. And of course, that's 2,000 days down the road. You don't know what's going to happen there. But if let's say that ratio is relevant, right? And ETH is in, I don't know, 5.5 years, 10 grand. Well, now you have to think about those numbers for a moment and think about the value of 1/800th of $10,000 and where we are now. And I'm not saying for a second that that's going to happen, but what I am saying is it's important to understand when this system works perfect and it's built upon in a way that has longevity and adoption, that's the potential. And it's pretty astonishing to think about, honestly.
Yep. To calculate the price floor in the future, once all the caps are hit, you need to do 800 times 280 days, because that's the max you can mine if you're willing to wait 280 days, because it does move down at that point, which is 800 times 280, which is 224,000 for a max miner, Titanx. And if Ethereum price stays the same, Ethereum is currently at 2,100. 2,100 divided by 224,000 is exactly a penny, 1 cent. That's funny. And this is assuming, well, exactly, it's like 0.009375.
Still, that's a pretty significant increase. That's huge.
Yep.
And now with that, because we're talking about how, okay, that's the future, that's how it looks like. Well, how do we get there? Well, this, guys, and I see a lot of you guys asking about releasing the beast, talk about Hyper. Now's the time where I want to ask you about Hyper. What is Hyper? You mentioned in the white paper, you haven't been too public about it. What is it? What can you share with us?
So a big design idea of Titanx is having things built on top of it. So Hyper will very likely be the first protocol that launches on top of Titanx, where you're going to be able to take your liquid Titanx. So one of the things that will keep the market at a premium is having very, very strong utility on liquid Titanx. So people have a reason to actually buy it off market and then use it to participate in a protocol built on top of it. That will force the market to operate at a premium versus mining, pretty much. So Hyper will be the first protocol You're going to be able to burn liquid Titanx to get Hyper, or you're going to be able to burn staked to get Hyper. In your stakes, it doesn't matter how long your stake is. You're just going to get the amount. So let's say you do a stake with like 1 million Titanx. You do 1 million Titanx in a stake. If you burn it for Hyper, you get 1 million credit. Same thing if you burn a liquid. So there's not like some stake benefits or whatever. Other than you get the Ethereum payouts. And there's going to be a multitude of benefits to burning for Hyper. One is big utility is having the ability to get liquid on your stakes. The other is there's very likely going to be massive arbitrage opportunities between Hyper and Titanx. The other is you get a percentage of the burn pool payouts. So 7% of the Ethereum, once it's enabled, will go towards the burn pool payouts. And depending on how much you burn versus everybody else in a 28-day period, you'll get a percentage of that burn pool. So there's like a minimum amount burned there because there's going to be an arbitrage there. And then also the burn bonus amplifier. So the reasons to burn for Hyper are going to be liquid on stakes, burn pool bonus, burn bonus amplifier, and the arbitrage on Hyper Titanx. And then Hyper will also have some utility to it. You're going to be able to stake it, earn trust as yield, and it will reduce the Titanx supply. And the biggest liquidity pool is going to be between Titanx and Hyper. Hyper will have a small Ethereum cost to burn. So it's going to be 0.2 Ethereum per 1 billion Titan that you burn, staked or liquid. That Ethereum will go buy Titanx off a market and then swap that Titanx for Hyper. This is a very important idea here is when Titanx gets swapped for Hyper, it does not hurt the Titanx price on the Titanx wrapped Ethereum ratio because that's how DEXs operate. Hyper will pretty much always operate at a premium compared to Titanx. So there's going to be massive arbitrage opportunities and Hyper is going to be the thing that pulls it up. It's very advanced game theory. But Hyper is kind of going to be a form of native staking of Titanx, but then in the Hyper token, pretty much. And it's always going to be 1-to-1, 1 Titanx for 1 Hyper. And as Titanx gets more scarce and more scarce and more expensive and more scarce over time, the Hyper goes up with it at pretty much almost an exponential rate because there's also going to be an early adoption bonus on Hyper. Hyper I'm still working on the elevator pitch, but it's the first protocol built on top of it. It will eat the Titanx supply, which pushes the Titanx value up. It's going to be very interesting to watch. I'll give you that.
Yes.
The big reason I also
100%.
staked, like, because I'm also personally invested in Titanx with like a large percentage of a net worth. Because it wasn't one of the biggest things that I think why people like Titanx is we didn't have a sacrifice, we didn't have an ICO, we didn't do a fundraise, there were no backdoor deals. This was just purely fairly launched code on chain. So I have to mine my supply together with everybody else. I don't really have an advantage. So I actually bought a bunch of Titanx at like 0.502 when it overextended to the downside. I created stakes and I'm planning to burn my stakes for Hyper.
Brilliant. That's
one of the biggest things that I think why people like Titanx is we didn't have a sacrifice, we didn't have an ICO, we didn't do a fundraise, there were no backdoor deals. This was just purely fairly launched code on chain. So I have to mine my supply together with everybody else. I don't really have an advantage. So I actually bought a bunch of Titanx at like 0.502 when it overextended to the downside. I created stakes and I'm planning to burn my stakes for Hyper.
Brilliant. That's before I go over my thoughts on Hyper and everything, I do think that's one of the more interesting things about this is there's no centralized entity that can, just, and I'm not, and this isn't a comparison to Hex, but normally because I don't think Hex has an issue there. I think the OA in Hex is as benevolent as it gets. It's proven that. I don't think there's an issue. But for other projects, you have like this issue. People look at it and they say, well, there's one entity or one whale or one benevolent act or one actor that basically owns, or the team owns like 80-90% of the supply, and that's like a big red flag, right? Well, that isn't here. And yes, you do have the buy and burn as a centralized point, but that is you can only call the buy and burn function. So I think that's super interesting. And now on Hyper as well, in terms of buy and burns, this is the way I'm seeing the system. We've got buy and burn V1, buy and burn V2. You've got the Uniswap fees that are collected from V3 and that are used to buy and burn. Then you're going to have the builder fee that's used to buy and burn. Then you're going to have the cost to basically burn Titanx or liquid or staked, which is going to be going to the buy and burn. You've got like 5 or 6, possibly even 7 vectors of buy and burn, all within one protocol.
Another thing I forgot to mention is, there's so much game theory to this. The Hyper Titanx pool, there's going to be, it's going to be the exact same thing. So in Titanx, the initial liquidity pool was created by the buy and burn smart contract. Yeah, exactly. So the initial liquidity pool for Titanx wrapped Ethereum was created by the buy and burn smart contract. So nobody owns it. It's owned by the smart contract with no way to access it. So it's literally the same as locked liquidity pretty much. So nobody can rug pull it. And Hyper is going to be the same. So the initial pool between Titanx and Hyper is going to be created by the Hyper buy and burn contract. And the same decentralized LP fee, so 1% Uniswap v3 pool, will also, the collected fees on that Titanx Hyper pair will also burn the Titanx that it gets in fees and Hyper that it gets in fees.
Jeez. Oh my dude. What?
Right?
I didn't realize there's that many vectors of buy and burn. Like there's literally 8, possibly even 9 from what you just said there. I mean, that's kind of crazy. I don't even know if there can, well, there's definitely enough sell pressure to do some dents in the price temporarily, but man, wow, that's interesting. And I mean, that's just one protocol. That's just Hyper coming online. That does not include if anybody else decides to do something similar at all or build at all, because those fees are going to do the same thing over time. I mean, those are just vectors of buy and burn. But if someone else brings something on that also burns Titanx as the underlying asset of the ecosystem, I mean, that goes even crazier. The supply is going to shrink. Like already, if we go to our supply here, like we're already only at 16 or 17% liquid, and we can bet. I mean, I would say my guess is that a large number of this Titanx supply that is staked will be used for Hyper, especially if Hyper opens up with an opportunity to make some moolah, right? Or to take advantage of an arbitrage, right? So we could see this supply shrink because maybe the supply that's already out there, and mind you, like 48 or 50 billion of this Titanx supply is in the liquidity pool. So basically it's 300 billion right now that are liquid. And if that comes into staking and gets burned, well, man, there's going to be no supply for people to sell. And then there's going to be, it's going to be crazy.
Yep. I like things to be double audited, preferably triple audited. After having gone through the auditing process for Titanx, you start realizing that, and even smart contract auditors say this, projects that are audited once are absolute garbage because one auditor cannot find anything, even if it's a firm. So you need to get an auditor to audit the auditor, and then you need to get an auditor that audit the auditor that audited the auditor. 3 is like the industry standard of audits. So you do one audit, you fix all the bugs that they found in the code, you put it off to the other auditor, he finds all the bugs, you put it off to the other auditor, and he kind of does a final checkup. If the third auditor can no longer find attack vulnerabilities or attack angles on the code, that's when you know you're good. I no longer trust projects that only have one audit, because all the big behemoths, because I watched, if you look on YouTube, there's a YouTube channel called DeFi Security Summit, and it's where all the big dudes come together and they talk about their security best practices. They all do at least 3 audits. A lot of them do even 8 or 9. So you need multiple audits on a project, and every audit takes like a week. I think one of the cool things that developers can do. So have you heard of this idea of the Archimedes lever, where if you have a lever that's you can lift the world pretty much. So Archimedes lever, the reason that applies to the ecosystem, Hyper will be like this very sensitive point where the moment the hyper arbitrage opens, it pushes the entire ecosystem up with the least amount of economic energy. So if whales want to actually benefit the ecosystem, or developers want to benefit the ecosystem, they might want to consider building protocols on top of Hyper instead of Titanx, because it has this lever effect that drags the entire ecosystem up. Because the more valuable Hyper becomes, the more the arbitrage opens, which pushes up Titanx. Titanx pushes up, Hyper pushes up. So Hyper will kind of be this Archimedes lever on the entire ecosystem, where it takes the least amount of energy to have the most amount of impact.
That's interesting to think about. Very interesting. I should say the word bullish.
Yeah, obviously none of this is financial advice, price prediction of any kind, no expectations. But it all looks very exciting. I like it. Because one of the core design principles of Titanx is I like looking at everything from first principles. I learned from Elon Musk. I watch a lot of his interviews, and he talks about this idea of first principles. How do you break everything down to its most constituent parts, is what he calls it. And in my background, I used to run a marketing agency, and a big part of the work that we did was optimize ecom funnels. So we did a conversion rate optimization for ecom funnels. And in that, you notice that if there's 1% slippage in your entire funnel, you could lose on millions and millions of dollars on the back end if you run like $1 million a month in ad spend. I've always been, every kind of system that I build, I hate the idea of waste. Either you let a lead fall through the cracks, or they kind of miss a part in the sales process, or you have a funnel that isn't optimized, and you're missing out a massive amount of revenue, which could literally but just be a simple headline on a page. It's costing you millions and millions of dollars a year. So I've always kind of operated on this idea of zero waste. That's why the LP fees, they don't go to waste. They actually go ahead and burn and fuel the buy and burn. The LP fees came from the idea of zero waste. And then the other thing is, a big design principle for Titanx is all the bad actors benefit the good actors. So if a bad actor, for example, mines a bunch of supply and then dumps all of it, they benefited the entire ecosystem. They funded the buy and burn. They funded the staking payouts. And they just have a little dump on the chart, which is it gets eaten up by the buy and burn. So no malicious actor can actually come in and hurt people without actually benefiting the ecosystem first.
That's huge. That's very huge. Man,
Sure.
I'm very excited about this. You know, I think Titan is such an interesting plot twist on kind of, you know, what's been this kind of long, dreary bear market. You know, I think,
yep.
You know, and who's to say that, you know, Ethereum won't have a bit more of a downward trend over the next 6 months or so, because, you know, we're not exactly in prime conditions for a healthy market, let's say. But I mean, I'm not a market analyst. I'm not an expert there. But like, even let's say if that happens, I mean, you know, Titan could still perform quite well because the floor is always rising relative to ETH. And even if ETH goes down, you know, it's kind of almost like a hedge, you know, in the way that the system works. It's a compounding rocket ship upwards as ETH goes up, and it's kind of like a hedge against going down in terms of the value of the Titanx, or in terms of value of Titanx over time. So I think it's a very interesting system, man. I appreciate the work you put into it. Make sure you go follow Jake on Twitter. There's also a few Telegram chats as well. So if you guys have questions about this, before I talk about my stuff, there's the Telegram as well, which I don't think I actually have in the description. I'll put all the links for this video in the description, but there is 2 Telegrams. There's just one. I think there's a news one and there's a main one as well.
Yeah, exactly. There's a news one and there's a main chat room. The news one is just for like important things like this live stream and stuff. And then the chat one is just for chatting.
Right. Yeah. And I would highly recommend, guys, if you have questions, you want to get started, there's a lot of people in the Titanx Telegram that are fantastic, answer all your questions. That'd be the great place to start, as well as the white paper like we went over today, which you can get all the information for that.